So let's kick it off. Welcome to the April exclusive. Today's conversation is about data and strategy and things in that realm. We're going to be talking with Sean and myself about data and about strategies for data, how XCL can assist with your strategy and data, what to collect, how to use it afterward, topics in that sort of vein. So, hi, Sean. How you doing?
Hello. Playing the part of Sarah today while she's at
Yeah.
Learning Technologies in the UK.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And yeah, why don't you kick us off with let's just talk in general terms about converting something like SCORM data to xAPI and what the value of that would be.
Yeah, for sure. I think over the years, we've all kind of been a part of the limitations of SCORM, of getting that score, or at least SCORM as it's shown to us in LMSs with completion, score, and we're left wondering a little bit there. I think what xAPI gives us is the ability to dig into that data more and get to the point where we can see not only do people actually get through something, but what if there's optional content? How are they moving through the content? What sort of things are they seeing that affect the likelihood that someone's going to complete a piece of content? So it really gets into that more granular data that we don't see out of SCORM. For example, there was a use case several years ago that we saw of a hospital chain that was looking at an e-learning for their doctors and nurses. And they got to the end of it, and all of a sudden they saw 90% failed this very simple task that they should have known how to do. Without xAPI, it would have said, oh, wow, 500 people just failed this. We need further training. Because they had xAPI and they could see that more granular data and get into where did people click, what did they look at, they realized that all of the people missed the actual button and never clicked on the quiz to go into it. So they didn't get it wrong. They didn't actually do it. So it gives us that ability to really see the behavior of people as they're within some sort of learning intervention. The other thing I think it does that SCORM doesn't is a use case that I had several years ago. A very small development team wanted to know, are the things we're creating actually being used? And what we found out through tracking our xAPI statements is that the single piece of that training that was the longest to create, no one actually used. And we ended up saving ourselves about 800 hours of development time over the course of a year. So being able to dive into that data that SCORM would never give us, and the fact that we deployed it without an LMS, just as a web page, allowed us to get to a point where we could see the data without having to be beholden to an LMS or make our users go through that process.
So that's excellent. Yeah, those are great use cases. I've always equated it to SCORM tells you how someone did on a particular piece of learning, whereas xAPI can get you closer to why they got the score that they got or why they got the engagement that they got and can start to answer what we've wanted from any piece of digital content ever, which is closer to data that informs business decisions. That's, I think, the ultimate goal is how do we capture data in a way that we can inform some type of business decision later on or validate a business decision that we've made without data. And that could be moving from an LMS to something that uses xAPI in order to get more insight to make better business decisions or validate, hey, this program had value. It did this and this, and we've got data from the sales department to say that this and this happened.
Yeah, I think the other side of it is the key tenet that we've always talked about with xAPI, and we probably say it on every one of these that I've joined, is not all the data should come from a SCORM file within an LMS. People learn from many different things, and we want to understand what all of those things are and what are the things that actually lead to the behavior change that we're going to. And to your point, the business decisions of what do we lean into more and what do we pull back from a little bit when it comes to really extracting the behavior change that we want to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have an anecdotal project that I worked on. This is years ago, but xAPI was used, but it was more the chain of data that was important in the exercise was there's training courses about using various resources to enhance your sales platform, if you will. And the training influenced how to use these materials. xAPI wrappers on the materials themselves help identify who is actually using these materials and how frequently and whatnot and so forth. And then sales data from the CRM was also used in a BI tool to show dashboards from beginning to end that there was an upward curve in sales for folks who used this. And then it also helped identify who the top performers were and take a look at how they were experiencing and engaging with the content. And then that model was replicated in the next version of the content to enforce those good behaviors of the top performers among the rest of the team. And overall, the sales goal was higher. That was not possible in a SCORM environment. Parts of it might be, but when we really think about it, no one's going to, there's a human involved and no one's going to log into an LMS to open a resource to do a sales task. It's just not what's going to happen. We all know that. It's just not going to happen.
It's really interesting because it sounds like that sort of broke down some of the silos in between training data and real life business data.
Yeah. Yeah. It corroborated everything together, which that was the overall goal for me, was to practice this idea of beginning to end, from training to ROI, direct relationship. There's data all the way through, and now a real decision can be made. And it can be made entirely influenced by the data collected, which kind of leads us to the next topic, which is BI. We've collected the data. We've got SCORM. We can convert to xAPI data, get a little bit more granularity in that data, get a little bit more understanding of how engagement is occurring, how experience is occurring. We know what data we want to collect to inform various decisions like, is this course working? Can it be improved? Is there an outcome? What objectives are being covered? And then there's all the other data in the organization. How do we marry all those things together? And one of the goals is we need to get training data into sort of corporate data lakes or corporate BI tools. And for anyone who doesn't know what a data lake is, it's a large data pool or a series of pools. Making a lake, it's a source of raw data. It's a source of truth within an organization. And some organizations don't have a data lake. They simply have sources of truth, multiple sources of truth. And ultimately, there's a BI tool, which is a reporting platform, a data visualization tool that's going to pull from multiple different sources and create reports across all of that data. Another key feature of this entire thing is that data going from its source to some type of visualization generally undergoes some reformatting, some cleaning. There's modeling that needs to be done before the visualization. And XCL, just to drink the Kool-Aid, XCL does have tools that help in all those ways. So we do have the XCL data connector or BI connector that allows you as a user to have control over what that filtering and formatting on the front end looks like, or simply to push all data directly in its current state as truth to a data lake. So we offer many different ways to use the tool. It can be configured in a lot of different ways in order to, again, to break down any opinion that we have on how the data gets used and to keep it flexible and open to your business's needs. The goal being is to get some of this training data and some of this experiential data with content, because we know XCL is not just for training. Any piece of content can be wrapped and understood on a deep level. Things like PDFs, videos, infographics, even very point and click type of stuff that can help influence some of the decision making that goes on at higher levels within a company and even within a small company. Making those relationships between what's being exposed to the team and what the outcomes really are. So getting data from both ends. So just going down that hole, our connector provides the data, provides it on a cadence. As I said, any configuration of that data works, from preparing a flat file that can be pulled in, to pushing to a flat file, to preparing a table, to doing all the things in between, any kind of API or script that needs to be run. And we can, in that process, filter the data. So perhaps you don't need every experience statement within all of your visualizations that comes out of an authoring tool like Storyline. Naturally, I would say keep them. Keep them in your data lake. That's what data lakes are for. Storage is cheap and filtering is easy. But in some cases, we can actually pre-filter that for you to make things simpler so that your data source is clean. There may be translations that you want to have done, certain verbs to other verbs. Those kinds of things can be accomplished at the BI tool level. And then there's cadence, of course. So we can have the data available to you. We can push it to your systems on a cadence of every few seconds, up to once a day, whatever meets the needs of your organization. Obviously, less is more when it comes to pushing machines to compute things. But yeah, there's flexibility. There's flexibility in those tools. And another thing that kind of makes that tool a little bit more powerful is our connector with XAction. So I just wanted to talk about that real quickly. I know we've done sessions on that in the past, but just talking about data, XAction is a plugin that you can use with XCL to take advantage of triggering certain other actions that aren't in our tool, but triggering those actions using statements. So if someone were to complete a certain link, some other action can be performed, like a badge can be awarded, an email can be sent. Those are examples of very simple tasks, but this can push other data into an LMS. It can push data or make changes to an HRIS record, push data into a CRM for in the case of providing a white paper by PDF or something like that through an email. There's a lot of different use cases. Again, we don't have an opinion on how it gets used. The tech's there, and we're definitely here to consult with you on how to take advantage of that in the most efficient way. But that's another kind of option on the data layer that lets you take advantage of XCL's features, take advantage of xAPI data, which is very complex, but we can make it very simple and human readable through this BI connector tool.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience, that's the kind of data that businesses seem to struggle with, especially in the traditional. Again, we talk a lot about the LMS SCORM formats. Being able to see the data out of a traditional LMS can sometimes be extremely difficult. It's locked down. It's the views that you get there. Being able to see how that ties to behaviors, behavior change, even to a certain degree, the profiles of the people taking that. And it's interesting to hear you talk about being able to put that into a stronger BI arena and being able to slice and dice that in more distinct ways, more granular ways that let you see what, from my perspective as an ID, what really does make behavior change. What things are people working on? Again, as we talked about earlier, what things should we lean into? What things should we go away? And I think as we look at in the L&D space, AI coming into this only allows for more data and for more incorporation of xAPI and being able to pull this data together. So it's really interesting to think about the ramifications of having that in a singular place, or at least singular access place, and potentially amongst many different servers or whatever, but being able to get access to that and slice it up in any way that we see fit to link to the real business data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know of at least one of our customers that are using the BI connector to do exactly that, to marry training data on a specific program with human resources records to provide a really deep and rich understanding at a human level of someone's experience through some live training, through some online assets, and then perhaps even in the future to some additional materials that will be dripped out over time for enhancing their understanding of certain skill sets and certain policy. And I think once that's done, that use case makes the whole thing make more sense versus having these unique and distinct little tools that I don't think we often enough see the whole picture, the whole beginning to end value of having this particular data, which traditionally is not really included in a BI sense, being available to BI for those higher level reports, for higher level decision making, just seeing gaps in other data and being able to fill those with some real data to say that, hey, the training has done its job here. And perhaps problems within a system can be identified more clearly when simply adding more training content, adding another storyline isn't always the answer. Or just identifying where adding a storyline was the answer and did do the work, or adding a PDF in the right time did have an impact and made a difference and was valuable and worthwhile. Can be done in the future kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. The client that y'all have that works with the HRIS, I think that's an interesting way to look at data that again, I think a lot of companies struggle with that of, yeah, we know the name of the person that did it, but what's their background? What are the skills that they have? What are the things that they took before? And what I've always seen in theory is if you could get that and pull that together as a business, you could say, oh, this person's coming along the same path. What if we could make recommendations to them to take the same thing and do that comparison and have all of that data together that we could then say, yeah, it did help this person with the same background, or this is the piece that helped them, the common denominator between them that really helped. Here's the things that differed and continue to build that machine learning almost of, yeah, we're seeing connections between these things and we can make better recommendations to not have to put as much training in front of someone that maybe isn't as impactful to them as it could be if we tailored it more to the person that's coming in.
Absolutely. And it can be used in any way, any of those ways. It can be used to identify leaders. It can be used to identify people who are struggling and need a little extra assistance, or maybe seeing where someone could be useful across multiple different roles. From that perspective, all those things presently possible. Even in some LMSs, you can get connectors that update HRS data, but it becomes cumbersome and clunky, and you lose that truth. And just the 2 seconds on what does truth mean in data? All data is generally dirty. It's raw, it's dirty, it's filthy. There's data in there you're never going to use. There's data in there that's potentially erroneous, that's wrong. It's the result of an error. It's the result of redoing something too many times. It's the result of just computers being silly sometimes, or people being silly sometimes. But the data lake keeps it all, and that keeps it true. If the data lake mirrors exactly what your LRS says, or if there's a direct connection forward of every statement, your data lake becomes true, and then your filtering and modification can come from there. We're always looking at a lens on data. We're never really seeing it for what it is because we're human and we can't actually understand it for what it is easily anyway. Our BI tool does that as well. The two ways of using the BI tool, one is we just send everything into your data lake, and you can do that without the BI tool. You can forward directly from an LRS to a BI tool. What the BI tool, the added value though, is to do some of that filtering and cleansing and reformatting ahead of time, presenting you with tabular data like an SQL table or spreadsheet type data that's much easier to work with for a wider variety of folks using a BI tool like Microsoft BI to create quick and simple visualizations, but also giving them the power to tie that to other data within the organization. And I think that's the real power. And that's our one customer who's taking that route, not requiring extremely highly skilled data intelligence officers, but rather being able to use normal people that need data, creating in that point and click environment using live or nearly live 1 hour up to 1 hour old data from the LRS, but presented in a table. Essentially the download that you get, the CSV download that you get from XCL, but having that presented in an SQL table that's constantly updated every hour, available to them. I think the value that they're finding from that is outstanding. They're also using it to determine errors in the course. They're seeing things come to light, like doubling of scores and things like it's really becoming very evident when certain folks are tripling 300-400%
Yeah.
scores. It's identifying some of those weaknesses in the content that they can go back and fix, which is really critical. In 2 or 3 spot checks, they might not see it. In a report, in an LMS or a traditional learning report, anything over 100% is 100%. So this kind of thing might be missed. But when points are being used and tokens are being used, you start to see that in a differential environment where calculations are being done in real data. So really cool stuff. Really happy that we're able to present learning data to the same systems that all other business tools present data to, and keeping that level very high. Again, I don't think that XCL is the only tool in the world that does this. We just do it in the simplest way. So there's low complexity, remarkably low cost, and you can get the job done without needing those massive corporate structures like a data lake or a data intelligence team.
It's very interesting to see what you all have done. And to your point, the simplicity of building that in there and just getting the testing that I've done, the data flow, and being able to see that quickly and easily. I love the testing part of it, to be able to see in real time, am I actually getting what I'm expecting out of this? And not waiting to, oh, I have my score file. I went through and the completion didn't happen. Okay, now I've got to go back to my development tool and jump through some hoops there to figure out where it's breaking. Whereas with a lot of the xAPI through XCL, it does make it easier to find those spots where things are breaking. And when the statement doesn't come up or we don't see the next screen or whatever it is, it makes that easier. And yeah, to your point of points in percentages and all of that, it definitely makes it easier to see those. And I love the fact that it can be ported to the same tools that everything else resides in. It's that one single source of truth. And I've definitely seen a lot of people that I've worked with in the past that, oh, we've got 3 LMSs within our company. They all report differently. We don't have any way to pull all that data together. Or maybe it's not even an LMS. It's, I've got a roster sitting in a desk somewhere that I have no way to bring it all together with every other piece of data that I have. And this potentially allows us to give that sort of easy path into the one source of truth, or linking it to your HRIS that becomes the source of truth for the final data. It's just really interesting to think about the potential there because it pushes to it, because we have the granularity and we can get to that deeper level of understanding that we couldn't out of our traditional SCORM packages that we had.
Absolutely. And I think the last piece I'd say, just sum it up and figure out what a next step looks like in this world. In an ever growing economy of data driven decision making, in order to be at the table to make a decision, you need to be data. And I think this type of thing, and the more systems and tools in learning present data in a way that can be consumed by the business intelligence tools, it gives that data a seat at the decision-making table. And I think that's the critical part. And then, of course, the next step in anyone considering moving this process forward is starting to think about what kinds of questions are you trying to answer at that table? And then that will flow back to exactly what kind of xAPI data do you need to capture? What do you need to know about a PDF? The vanity metrics are how many pages were viewed, how long someone looked at a page, but what's the real value that you need to know about this PDF? What would close out its ROI? What would close out a decision that could be made based on the data that you have? Is it completions? Is it the number of people who saw every page? Is there a link in the document that you want to trap or capture whether someone's linking away? Is it the number of times that it's being used? These are the critical kind of thinking parts. And that also feeds up back up to where we began, which is SCORM. I think SCORM in its brilliance captured information about a module. And I've always said that the SCORM captures information about a learning module. It doesn't capture anything else. And that information can be used in some squinty eyes, squint real hard. And maybe in the distance, there's a fuzzy image of what you can use that data for. But when you convert it to xAPI and add a little bit more clarity to it and add a little bit more usability to it, you change from its information about a module to its information about a person and their interaction with content and what they've achieved or gained or exposed losing while using that content. And I think that gives it more value to have a seat at that decision-making table when it comes to business decisions.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll harp on it because it's my thing, but data strategy. You talked about it without saying it. It's those questions of what is the data that we need to have, not just I showed a completion to your point of vanity metrics and they scored 85%. It's good enough. Kind of
Yeah.
vanity metrics. We don't get the full breadth of what took place there. I think it's definitely a good thing to think about data strategy. I know Sarah had sent me a couple of white papers that y'all put together on the website that are great for Swissport Midmark. Definitely excited to see what y'all are doing with that and what the customers are working through with those.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good to point those out, and definitely jump over to the website and check those out because there's some really interesting use cases that we're covering with XCL and some of our customers. We're really helping them, and they're really helping us understand how powerful this tool can really be. As we learn and grow through those scenarios, we're just improving the tool to do that work better. And we found some other use cases, which were really interesting. Some new tech coming down the pipe when it comes to our next release, involving even simpler ways to identify a user without any kind of form, without any kind of anonymous bypass, and without SSO, simply direct connections with existing logins that just makes it seamless and easy. But to do that, generally, we have to take the heavy lifting of the complexity and the hard. Once we've got through some of those hurdles and made that available, we'll definitely talk about them in an upcoming exclusive.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. I think wraps it up for this month's exclusive. And I appreciate everyone who's watching this. Yeah, let's definitely do it again soon.